Everyone. I was quite pleased to see that on the basis we're introduced as lawyers, so there's no heckling. I'm hoping that continues for the rest of the presentation. So I'm Mark Kenkre. I head up the fraud and risk team at Trowers. We're an international law firm concentrating on three main strands in terms of my team, dealing with prevention, stopping it happening, investigations when there's a suspicion of fraud, and recovery, either getting the money or the data back. And you'll be hearing from Chris and I looking at blockchain from our personal perspective, which is this a solution for cybersecurity, and how is this going to help us moving forward? So in terms of the world of cyber, and from our experience, 60–70% of all the fraud that we deal with is cyber related. So we have a real interest in cybersecurity, and as do our clients. One of the reasons we think there is a real issue is because you are interested in technological developments. If we as lawyers don't embrace technology, if you as organizations don't do, you become irrelevant. Hopefully not die, but you become irrelevant and obsolete. And therefore, we're always challenging the boundaries. Our experience is there's an underworld also has a commercial business to try and defraud you using technology. And this is either from internally from your organization through disgruntled employees, or it's external hackers. So we've looked at blockchain as is this the solution? And the problem has to be looked at before we can look at the solution. The problem in terms of fraud, we're told, is 173 billion in terms of the UK. But our clients actually aren't necessarily concerned wholly about the number. So in terms of the number, that costs you in terms of revenue. It costs you in terms of having to deal with lawyers or other professional advisors. And from a reputational point of view, as Talk, and the others that have come in the news in terms of data breaches, that costs you in terms of working and creating a greater market share. So we've been asked as an organization, and particularly looking at fraud, is blockchain the solution? We've had various challenges in terms of, is this a solution? But blockchain for us looks positive as a cybersecurity tool, in that it sits off the grid. It's a decentralized piece of technology. And Chris is, who's following me up, he's going to explain a little bit more detail as to how blockchain works. But I'm just going to concentrate on the positives from our point of view. So in terms of real-life examples, at my former firm, we dealt with certain retailers who were involved in the food fraud scandal all around horse meat. And one of the real challenges we had as advisors was actually explaining to the organizations and to the regulator where this meat came from. So tracking from the farm to the shop floor in a quick period of time and isolating where the issues were. And that took not hours, but it took over 10 days, because we were putting together lots of different databases from lots of different suppliers in not just the UK, looking at that wider. However, blockchain now gives us the technology to be able to condense all of that, so we can look at the chain and isolate immediately, within a matter of minutes, where that issue potentially is, and give transparency in terms of the chain. So that's a really positive in terms of isolating fraud and showing the transparent issues. The other issue that we face on the majority of fraud issues is, where is the money? And getting to the money quickly. And one of the challenges we face when asking banks to show us the chain of transactions is that money is transferred between banks who don't like talking to each other. Technology is being developed through blockchain to link all of that together so that we can look at the complete picture for all accounts. Now, at the moment, it's in a very developmental stage, but if that is fast-forwarded, that will be a real tool for us in terms of showing transparency, but also a real tool for isolating where the money is within the blockchain. I'm going to pass over to Chris, who is going to look at, well, as lawyers, we're not always going to say everything's great. We're going to show that there are some issues in terms of the technology, and Chris is going to look at the issues that we face here.
Morning. So Mark has given you an idea of what some of the advantages are with blockchain technology, how it might help to eradicate fraud, to trace the proceeds of crime, to trace assets that are being converted into other means. But what about the disadvantages? Is it as tamper-proof as everybody thinks it is? Well, first of all, think about what you need to do to input information on the blockchain. It still requires, at the moment, because we don't have the AI technology to do this without us, it requires human input. So going back to the horse meat scandal and the work around that, there's nothing, in theory, stopping an individual at a farm who is inputting the information on the blockchain, counterplate through the supply chain. If he's saying this supply, this delivery is meat, it's beef, if that actually turns out to be horse meat, there's nothing within the blockchain system that's going to stamp that out. It doesn't eradicate collusion, corruption, and dishonesty in that regard. So the first problem is the people problem. The second problem is a software issue. Blockchain is a piece of technology that allows businesses to use smart contracts, and that may be something that you're all familiar with. But if you're not, as a general rule of thumb, it's a system that would allow a business to automatically transfer money or data upon the completion of a certain element of a contract. It's looked at being used in the construction industry. So when a building gets to a certain point or when a payment stage is due, the money is automatically transferred. Great in principle, but your trust, instead of being placed from me to you, it's being placed in the software. If the software isn't good and the money is transferred too soon, you have lots of problems, and then you're calling us in to try and hopefully revoke that, get the money back, and then you're in lots of issues. You've got to expend money on lawyers that you probably wouldn't want to. The third issue is in relation to the size of the network. You may all be familiar with the concept of blockchain and the fact that it's a decentralized network. So the Bitcoin blockchain is public. Everybody stores their information on all of the ledgers are stored exactly the same in everybody's computer that's within the network. Great in principle. It means that tampering that would require somebody to attack all of those networks, all of those nodes at the same time. Very difficult, requiring a considerable amount of processing power. But what about within an organization if they're using a private blockchain? What if you've got a small to medium-sized business that's got a handful of directors that are looking at using this as a way of verifying dishonest transactions? If, much like with my example relating to the horse meat, and entering the information there, if they wanted to amend the ledgers, and all three of them agreed, they'd be able to do that. If they wanted to, or if they also wanted to enter dishonest transactions, and they all agreed, they could do that as well. So it doesn't stamp that out. And the last problem that I think is worth mentioning is the rise of quantum computing when that does come out. The idea at the moment is that the blockchain ledger is encrypted. You can't crack that without attacking all of the nodes or the majority of the nodes in that network. That's very difficult, and it would require a lot of work to get that done. The idea, and I was watching somebody speak here not that long ago, he said when quantum computing comes out, people will be able to crack and decrypt the blockchain in a fraction of the time. So we were listening to somebody speak yesterday, actually, over our offices on a similar issue, and they said some businesses are looking at using this to verify AML, anti-money laundering documentation. If that information was stored on the blockchain and somebody uses a quantum computer to crack it when it is available, all of a sudden, personal information, sensitive information, it's gone. It's shared with whoever wants to share it, and very difficult to get back. So is it as secure? That remains to be seen at the moment. And that brings me neatly on to a topic that a lot of you will probably be familiar with in cryptocurrency. So you may know that cryptocurrencies are a virtual currency, and the transactions and the information from those transactions are stored on a blockchain ledger. Great in principle. You'll all be familiar with Bitcoin in some form, I'm sure. Some of you may have invested, hopefully made lots of money and not lost money when it all crashed in January like I did, but there you go. Bitcoin, historically, certainly from my perspective, it had a bit of a stigma that came with it. It was used to launder money in some way. It was used to fund terrorism, buy drugs, buy guns on the dark web, untraceable. That was how historically it was used. But the concept of cryptocurrency is really, really important and quite revolutionary, I think, because what you're talking about is being able to transfer money, transfer value, potentially to somebody in another jurisdiction without having to suffer currency fluctuations. So my brother works for an SEO business, and he does a lot of work for people in America. And a few years ago, one of them wanted to pay him in in Bitcoin. And for him, at the time, it was very attractive, because when he was looking at how much he was going to lose otherwise, it was quite a good deal. Unfortunately, he didn't take the payment, so he didn't make as much money as he would have done before Christmas. But that's another story in its own right. And the other good thing is that you cut out the middleman. So if I want to pay money to Mark, I have to go to my bank in some form, and I ask for the bank to transfer money to Mark, and the bank facilitates that, and it talks to his bank and deals with it. But I could, using a cryptocurrency, pay Mark as easy as I could hand this over to him. That's the idea. So there are lots of opportunities that come with that, but there are also threats. What if, for example, a government, so financial regulation, big issue, particularly with the issue of cryptocurrency. China has banned initial coin offerings within its jurisdiction. The SEC in America is taking a view as to whether or not it's classed within securities laws. The FCA is investigating and just trying to decide how they're going to deal with it over here. But the reality is, and we've been working with some clients on this issue, is that you're in a position where it fits sort of in a grey area in between caught by the Financial Services and Markets Act, caught by financial regulation, caught by securities laws, and not. And if you're on the wrong side of that, there are potential criminal penalties. So what if, for example, so aside from that issue, what if you have a situation where you've got all your money invested in, you invest in some form of cryptocurrency and it's all going well, but then the country that you're dealing with, in which these coins were initially launched, bans cryptocurrency. That is because cryptocurrencies tend to be very volatile. That's going to have a significantly adverse impact on the value the value, and two, what's going to happen to the value of the business that's underneath it. So that brings me on to initial coin offerings. So the concept of that, for those that don't know, it's very much like an initial public offering. You are launching a cryptocurrency, you are sending it out to the market to be bought and sold. With an initial public offering, you produce a document called a white paper, and that white paper says, this is what my business is, this is what I do, this is why I'm creating this model, this is why I want to launch these coins, and this is what I'm going to do with it, this is what I'm going to do with the money, this is what my track record is. And it's all about establishing credibility. Now, you do that with an initial coin offering, but unfortunately, not all of them are as honest as they perhaps would say. It's been used in the past to shadow pump and dump frauds. It's also been used to siphon money out of those investments where people genuinely believe that they're investing in a business. They're not acquiring shares, remember. They're acquiring coins which could be used in a certain way that may be intrinsic to that business. It may be that it's transacting on a website. It may be that it's for use in some other way. And the possibilities are really endless there. But a really good example is a coin called Recoin, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. But it's a coin that was established and touted as one of the first cryptocurrencies to be backed by assets. It was said that they had property. It was said that they had other assets underneath it. And not only that, the professional advisors and the team that were advising on it who were being paid for doing that work were said to be reinvesting their proceeds, the money that they received, back in the cryptocurrency, back into the business, which of course creates interest. It creates people wanting to invest because they think, if I take these coins, if everyone's putting their money back in, the value is going to go up and I can sell it and it's a good investment. However, what actually happened was that the money was siphoned out. So the SEC had to go and get a freezing injunction in America, and there are criminal proceedings on foot. And that, unfortunately, is a real danger with some initial coin offerings and why it's a really dangerous space at the moment. So, we've talked about blockchain, we've talked about cryptocurrencies, and we've talked about cybersecurity, but how does it change things? Well, you still have to keep the 3 pillars of cybersecurity in place. You still have to have your people, processes, and technology up to date. This is a new technological advancement, and at the moment, it looks like it could create opportunities but bring with it threats. Because you're placing the trust in software, you need to make sure that your staff are trained and that you are able to respond to incidents as fast as you possibly can. That involves taking legal advice where you need to. It's about having your response plan in place should you need to actually respond to an incident, and that will often be in connection with a legal team, potentially a PR team, and also with your IT guys should data be lost in the way. It's about carrying out penetration testing and still almost saying business as usual at the moment and trying to get ahead of the curve. Unfortunately, fraudsters are very good at keeping in front of the curve, and we and technology are behind it. So we need to make sure that we are able to use and embrace that technology to grow business, to transact in ways that we couldn't before. So there are opportunities that come with it. And just lastly, just to tie into GDPR as something that I'm sure you all are sick to death of hearing about and will be up to and after the 25th of May, which is my birthday, so I feel like it's a special day just for that. It's all about knowing where your data is. Data is the new oil. Where is your data? How is it stored? Do you need to store it? And that's all part of your protection in these times and trying to ensure that you're not a victim of cybercrime. And I think, unless there are any questions, thank you very much for listening.
Any questions, guys? Gentleman over there. Try and get a mic to you. There we go.
Hello. Oh, this is loud. In regards to blockchain technology, obviously there's a lot of application in regards to fraud prevention and detection, but there's also a lot of possibilities in regards to committing fraud. I mean, look at privacy coins or Tether, just as a few examples. Do you think there would be some sort of compliance procedure that comes in place that could prevent blockchain technology to be used illegally?
It's a really good question. I think that as technology develops, the uses for that technology, so whether it's used to verify transactions and the extent to which it's relied on, will be the subject of a lot of debate over the next few years. And I think the reality is, for a lot of people, it's not an if, it's a when. And blockchain isn't the complete solution to all problems. I've not met one person that's told me blockchain is the answer to everything. So I think in the round, it's going to help. You can use it to verify credentials. It can help speed processes up. But is it going to, how is it going to develop? Unclear. It will develop, I think, as does quantum computing and other issues that come with it. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Yes,